Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Scott Luton, Greg White, and Karin Bursa here with you on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Greg, how are we doing today?
Pretty good, all things considered.
All
Weather's
things
beautiful. Chiefs stink,
Oh,
but we're over that. As I
okay.
told
Are you
some
sure?
buddies yesterday, yeah, pretty much. You can't win them all, but we can still win 16. So
The Chiefs will be just fine, undoubtedly. And Karin Bursa, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Scott. It's good to be here with you guys.
You as well.
yeah,
You as well.
likewise. Welcome.
Hope you both had wonderful weekends. But hey, just remind everybody, today is a supply chain buzz where we share, talk about, give our take on some of the leading stories across global business. So we're going to be discussing a wide variety of topics. And Greg and Karin, we got a
Yes.
special guest joining us around 12:25 p.m. Eastern time. That would be Mr. James Malley with Paccurate. So stay tuned there.
Yeah.
So y'all notice there, I didn't wait for a nice smooth segue. I wanted to knock that out because I wanted to celebrate something. Before we gave some shout outs, I wanted to celebrate some recognition that came out, I believe last week, in the last 10 days or so.
What is it, Scott?
Karin was recognized with another Women in Supply Chain Award for 2022 from our friends at Supply and Demand Chain Executive. Karin, congratulations from all of us
Yeah.
Thank
here.
you. Thank you, guys. And thank you to the entire Supply Chain Now team for all you do to elevate supply chain, all things supply chain for all of us, but to give voice to so many women, because there were a number of women on this year's list that have been guests on Supply Chain Now. So that's exciting as well.
That is outstanding, richly deserved, and congrats again. The hits keep on coming. And y'all notice there, I tried to, Karin and Greg, I tried to put Karin on the rock and roll stage there. Y'all see?
I see that.
Highfalutin.
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, just look at her. Just look at her backdrop versus ours, Scott. She always uplifts our identity at all times. So.
That's right. That is right. Well, Greg, your thoughts there, and Karin, I appreciate that. We do work hard here to uplift voices from all walks of life. It's very important to us. It's in our MO. We've invested in a variety of programs and properties and series to make that happen. Greg, your thoughts on Karin's accomplishment there?
Yeah, well, I mean, a long time coming. Karin and I had a little exchange this weekend about how long we've been in supply chain, of course, and she's been in it every bit of every moment that both you and I have, Scott. So, yeah, I think a long time coming, but I think what's important is that we're doing it now, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it's necessary is good and kind of a flashback to the old days, right? That I think we need to fix. But look, Karin and every one of the ladies that was identified in that list have done so much for supply chain to uplift, add points of view. I mean, honestly, do the same work that anyone else has done, right? And you know, kind of come through sometimes when it wasn't as easy to participate. Let's face it, right? There were a lot of people with their name on their shirt that were not as big a fan of this kind of progression as possible. So, you know, as has happened. So I'm glad that it's happened, and it's to the benefit of the practice of every practitioner, and you know, and certainly well deserved.
Agreed, Karin. So congrats. Look forward to more. The hits keep on coming. So looking forward to a lot more, and big high five from your team, your family here at Supply Chain Now.
Yeah, we should just plan. I seriously, we should just plan on doing this once a year, right?
Right.
Thank you.
Just going to assume from here on out, Karin, that you know you'll be on the list. Do they have rankings? I wonder. We'll advocate to move you up 2 to 1 or wherever you land.
Karin, I'll give you the final word, and then we're going to say hello to a few folks.
Now, thank you for the words of encouragement and support. I really appreciate it. Personally, I look forward to the day when we don't have to talk about gender, when we are just rewarding the brains and passion and capabilities, whatever the packaging looks like, whatever color it is, whatever gender it is, that it's just pure recognition of the value that supply chain experts bring to every business.
Well said.
100% agree. Wait till there's just a list of the top persons in supply chain, right?
Yep. We'll get there.
One step closer.
That's right. Okay, so Greg and Karin, we've got a jam-packed show here today on Supply Chain Buzz, which hits social media every Monday at 12 noon Eastern time. I mentioned we got James Malley with Paccurate joining us here in about 20 minutes. Let's say hello to a few folks. Some of our faves are with us as always. Shelly Phillips is back with us. Good morning from Colorado. The Aspen Mountains, I'm assuming, have started to change. The trees. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Yes, the aspen trees. Yeah, they're beautiful.
Yeah, they turn a beautiful yellow and gold and orange color. Pictures, please, Shelly, or as you know, it didn't happen.
So I learned something new here. See, up till this point, everything I learned about Aspen all came from Dumb and Dumber, the movie. So, Shelly,
you're thinking of the town, right?
Yeah. Well,
also
Shelly,
beautiful.
That's right. Thank you for sharing. Dr. Rhonda, it's great to have you here today. So thankful to be here today. She says, here's to another week of learning from one another. 3, 2, 1, let's go. Hey, Dr. Rhonda, also love Work Life 360, the podcast. So keep up the great work there. Chantel is with us here today as always. Big thanks to Chantel, Amanda, and Catherine for helping to make production happen here today. As I mentioned, Catherine, happy Monday, Buzz Day to everybody. Let's see here.
I'm glad somebody said Buzz Day.
Right. It's got to be said. It's got to be said.
Right. It does now, right?
Abdul Razik, hello to you via LinkedIn. Great to see you. Let us know where you're tuned in from. Nathan. Hey, Tom Rafter is with us here today from Seville in the sunny south of Spain. Now, Karin, I think you and Tom had gotten together on his podcast at some point, right?
We have, absolutely. The man in supply chain with more fedora hats than anyone else I know, and always a great perspective as well. So it's good to have you with us, Tom.
That's right.
I guess I didn't realize there were multiples. That's interesting.
Well, Tom, keep grinding the hits out. Doing good work with all of your podcasts. So great to have you here today. Nathan, hey, we're looking forward to sharing some knowledge and learning from all of y'all in the cheap seats as well. Let's see. And I'm also going to Gene Pledger is with us here today. LGP. Good morning, everybody. Congrats, Karin. And Renee's with us, and Glorimar's with us. So great to have everybody in the house. Okay. So Karin and Greg, we have got a lot of news to get through, a lot of big voices to get through, get all of y'all's take. Are y'all ready to get started?
I'm ready.
Well, then,
Are you waiting for an answer from me? Just
we know Greg is always ready. So.
He's like the battery, ever ready. Is one Greg White. Okay, so I want to start today's Buzz discussion with news out of Ford Motor Company. Now, there's been no shortage of Ford news lately, and most of it has not been great news. Very frankly, the automaker has announced that it plans to restructure its C-suite, and it's currently looking for a global chief supply chain officer. Amongst other things, Ford is looking to overhaul operations after supplier costs have run wild, kind of like Hulkamania used to run wild over its opponents, even while experiencing tons of parts shortages in recent months. So, Greg, I want to go to you first here because one of your very popular supply chain commentaries kind of focused on this last week. So, tell us more about this Ford story here.
What a stunner. I think when I wrote that commentary, the first thing that immediately came to mind, and you know how that is with me, I just spilled it, is how does the company who literally invented vertically integrated supply chain not have a global supply chain officer, right? Chief supply chain officer. It's just a stunner to me, and it's a problem, and the problems are manifest at Ford, of course. This is the company that ran out of blue ovals to put on their trucks.
Right.
We recognize that from a different article. Karin and I shared some thoughts over the weekend on that. Imagine a generic pickup that looks like a Ford driving down the road because the manufacturer who owns the trademark cannot put their trademark on their own product. Not to mention that somebody in the commentary, genius, Oh, it was Mark Morley said they may need a chief vehicle storage officer because they got 45,000 incomplete vehicles that they can't ship because they don't have all the parts. Another comment was from another Scott Dustin, who said, how many parts does it take to complete a Ford truck? All of them.
I love it.
I just thought that was absolute genius. But hey, look, we're pounding on Ford pretty good. It's not unique to Ford. And that's part of what I go into in the article. I think the production folks have dropped a link in there. Here is what has led to that. Two primary words. One is margin. And by margin, I mean gross and net margin. Gross is in capital letters when you're talking about manufacturers. And it is indeed gross to everyone else in the supply chain because it is routine for manufacturers to make 50% plus gross margins and 10 to 20% net margins. And that's after taxes. That's no qualifiers. That's earnings. No B, I, T, D, or A after that, just earnings. And by contrast, retailers and distributors make anywhere from 0, or in some cases, in some industries, less than 0 net margins, where some distributors have to trick the supply chain by forward buying inventory ahead of price increases. Price increases installed by who? You guessed it, the manufacturers. So they're anywhere from like -1% to 5% in a good or average year. So the argument is that supply chain at manufacturing, they've had a lot of opportunity to have slack and less efficiency in their supply chains because their margins are so big. But now there's nowhere to hide. So everyone knows that it's Ford's fault that they can't get blue ovals, regardless of what vendor they blame it on. Right. How do you, the most obvious of all parts, I'm just dumbfounded by that.
Well, hey, really quick, and Karin, I'm headed to you next, but Mark Morley and Scott. Mark's one of our faves, right? He's been with us on a couple different shows. Hope you and the family are well. Y'all keep the comments coming. As much as I love Greg White's take on these supply chain commentaries, I love the comments. All right, Karin Bursa, your take on what's going on at Ford.
Well, Greg is right. He and I got really fired up about this, and the fact that the Ford oval, which nobody else is competing for, is out of stock is just a brain scratcher for me. But my takeaway from this is, the automotive sector really moved a lot of progressive techniques forward 25 years ago when we looked at lean and just in time and the Toyota production system. And they put so much pressure on their suppliers that many of those suppliers located their factories right next door to an assembly plant. So it's a little ridiculous that they didn't have visibility that their blue oval with the word Ford on it for their market leading F series trucks.
And highest margin, right?
And highest margin, absolutely. So my takeaway from this is supply chain deserves a seat at the C-suite table, and it's time to move over and pull up another chair. So whether you're Ford or you're an emerging business, make sure that your supply chain leader is part of every one of those discussions on innovation, on new market penetration, all of the branding, et cetera, because the time is now. And
amen, sister. Preach it.
It's just
oh my gosh.
Well, it's really interesting because this has been, we've been adding chief supply chain officer for several years now. It's no longer a trend. It's table stakes. Well, what's interesting as well, Beyond Meat Incorporated, y'all have heard of this company, right?
Yep.
It's been in the news for other executive reasons, very, very strange reasons, which I'm going to leave that. Y'all can Google that. But Beyond Meat over the weekend, their chief supply chain officer, Bernie Adcock, is leaving at the end of the month. And the company has decided to do away with the role. So So it's really interesting, some of the moves that are being made out there. But it is, Karin, back to your point, the automotive industry has led in many ways, a lot of innovation and a lot of how business should be done some time ago. And it's good to see Ford, hire some supply chain talent, some leadership talent, and let's find a way to move forward. Okay. So we're going to leave that story for there for now because we got a big topic to talk about next, even bigger than the first one. And that's beer. Let me just mention that beer on Mondays. So say it ain't so. According to our friends at USA Today, some folks are projecting that one of the next shortages, of course, I think some of the things we hope to never mention again, toilet paper and computer chips and the like. But one of the next shortages that we could be dealing with is a shortage of beer. Now, Greg and Karin, get this. Beer makers of all sizes are dealing with what the rest of us are dealing with, right? Inflation. Yep. But some breweries are having a hard time getting carbon dioxide, which you may not know is used to clean production tanks. And it's also used, of course, to give us our bubbles in our glass of beer, to carbonate the beer. Aluminum can availability has also been an issue for going back months now. And, of course, prices on everything, inflation and other reasons, from CO2 to malted barley, even the shipping is all up. So we may see this impact consumers' choices in the grocery aisle. In fact, one person from our friends at USA Today who put this article together mentioned that they're making as much beer as they were pre-pandemic, but the margins are so much different.
Yep.
So, Karin, I'll start with you in this case.
Yeah.
Your take on what we're seeing from a beer standpoint.
So remember that beer has a freshness element to it. So it has a shelf life associated with it. So you can't make it too far in advance and then plan to have it on the shelf for, a reasonable period of time. But to me, this is just another teaching moment. So if you weren't hit by the toilet paper, if that didn't teach you a thing or two about supply chain, maybe what's in the, in the beer chest is going to do that for you at this point in time. But, this is peak season. We got baseball season, football season going on. There's a lot of beer consumption that normally happens right now. So even people who aren't normally aware are going to be feeling the impact. And, households are struggling with inflation as well, right? Mm-hmm. So the average household, I think the last stat I heard is that their household expenses are up $400 to $500 per month.
I believe it. That's
That's $5,000 to $6,000 a year.
Yes. Karin and Greg, I popped in the grocery store Saturday morning, and amongst the things on my grocery list were a glass of pickles, over $4.50 for a jar of pickles. Karin,
how much were they before? I wonder.
About $2.99.
Yeah.
We eat a lot of pickles here in the Luton household.
That's over 100% inflation.
Right. It's unbelievable. But Greg, let's talk. I know that
you Argentina.
I know, Greg, that you don't indulge in any beer or adult beverages, so this might be a foreign subject for you. But your take on the potential beer shortage?
Yeah, you'll have to forgive me on 2 counts: 1 for the pun, and 2 for what I'm about to say, and that is, you won't find me crying in my beer over the margins that beer manufacturers, remember that thing we talked about in terms of gross margin, are facing. Now, obviously that's impacting all of us, and not at the rate apparently of pickles or eggs. The amount that you pay for eggs now is just stellar. But I think what's important for us to hope for is that maybe this will shift the trend in beer. My hope is that hops go up tremendously and people will stop making that awful tasting IPA and go back to lagers and stouts and pilsners and beer that actually tastes good. Because I think we all know the dirty little secret that practically nobody likes an IPA. It just gets you drunk faster. So,
man, we're getting into beer analysis here today, Greg.
Truthfully, you pay a premium for IPAs, so the fewer hops you have in a product, truthfully, you can actually generate margins. I don't know how people feel about IPAs, but I sure know how I do.
Well, we'll keep our finger on the pulse of the beer market for sure. And as Karin pointed out, between football and baseball postseason and the holidays, 'tis the season for sure. Let's take a couple comments, Greg and Karin. Amanda says the grocery prices are truly getting out of hand. We're having to make some major adjustments in our shopping. If there's a wine shortage, we might have to riot. Truth.
peacefully
Amen,
protest.
sister.
Not right.
Amen.
Dr. Rhonda says, holy pickles, eggs, $5 for a carton of 12. Goodness gracious. Tom says, he's having an issue with the video. Tom, reload it and we'll check with the production team there. Gene says,
he's on the he's on the Spanish coast. He's not having a problem with anything. Right?
Life is good. Life is
Check
good.
in later. Have a beer, Tom.
Gene says, I would pay double that for my pickles. Hey, Gene, I'm with you. I am with you for sure. And Shelly adds Ball cans, right? Ball, big aluminum provider, stop doing orders under $1 million. How about that?
Did they really?
$1 million or $1 million units?
That's a
Greg,
good point.
you and I, same thing.
So Shelly, would love to, if you could
Supply
clarify
chain planning,
there.
right?
That's right. Cans or dollars. Glormar says, oh my goodness, I'm going broke with the protein egg eaters in this house. Oh goodness, the pain continues.
So, the pandemic trend of buying your own chickens, right, might not be a bad one to consider.
Okay.
So, if your neighborhood allows it, which mine doesn't, by the way.
Greg and Karin, lots of good tips there. Lots of good tips. But hey.
Well, they're tips. I don't know if it's any good.
from Ford supply chain challenges and moves. And by the way, ask and we shall receive. Shelley says units, so 1 million cans. That is remarkable.
Whoa.
Okay, so Greg and Karin, we're getting a jump here. I'm surprised that we are all as succinct as we were talking about cars and beer.
We
can go back to it if you want.
Yeah,
Karin, go.
Well,
the thing on Ford that we need to keep in mind is that they're going through a product portfolio transition, and that's going to increase their costs and their complexity as they move more and more electric vehicles into the marketplace. And so, there's like a land grab happening for raw materials for the batteries that are capable of moving these vehicles in the marketplace. So we haven't heard the end of rising costs from a supply side in the automotive sector.
Agreed. Okay. So thank you, Karin, for circling back. And by the way, oil barrels went below $80 a barrel for the first time all year. And it's like no one's paying attention. It's crazy.
44.
44.
I'm just saying it. I'm just tossing it out there.
Oh, that's the target price you're saying.
OPEC will up production until it gets to 44. They're going to break the back of American and other producers, and so that they can then overtake the market yet again.
Wow. Okay. All right. That is good stuff, Greg and Karin.
I'm probably wrong, but I said it, didn't I?
We're gonna circle this. We're gonna timestamp it and come back to you in about 6 months. But hey, we're gonna bring our guests in just a second. But really quick, I want to, something came up Friday on our call or huddle, and I touched on the business buzz we dropped today on the Supply Chain Now podcast channel in my faith and humanity segment. I usually add in those things. And I want to give a shout out to the Dave Krejci Foundation. We're not going to do the full story justice here today.
Gosh, yes.
If you believe and you love a good moment like we do here, Osborne High School, which based on the records I could find, it's been around for quite some time, but they have not had a winning season since 2004, at least in the records I could find. It may predate that quite a bit. Well, this year, beyond the challenges associated with any football season, well, equipment was a challenge because evidently in high school football they have added new regulations in terms of how the safety rules when it comes to helmets.
Yes,
and so many high schools had to reinvest in new helmets. Well, that's $300 a pop per helmet, and Osborne High School did not have the funds. Well, dadgum, Dave Krejci Foundation, several other organizations got together and they purchased those helmets for them. And so fast forward to now, I think they're 5 weeks into their season. I'm proud to share with you both, Greg and Karin, all of our listeners, that the Cardinals, the Fighting Cardinals of Osborne High School, are 5-0. But
looking good.
They really are. So that is a wonderful story. Such a big fan of the Dave Krejci Foundation, and there's other groups that stepped up and really saw a problem and fixed it. So big shout out to Allison and Donna, Allison Krejci Giddens and Donna Krejci here, and the great work they're doing. Y'all check it out at davekrejci.com. livestream.com, I think is the URL. Okay. Greg.
Org?
Well,
org.
I thought it was org too. And then as I was
it's not.
recording on Sunday, DaveCraigie.com. So maybe they have,
how did they get that?
Well, I tell you what, Amanda, Chantel, and or Catherine, if y'all could Google that and drop the link to their foundation in the comment in the chat, that would be wonderful.
I think we can all thank the Krejci Foundation and whoever else might have contributed to that for literally delivering one of the best football programs in Cobb County, right in the Atlanta area. So, I mean, that's how critical this kind of initiative is. I mean, those clearly are some of the best football players in the area, and some of them may not have gotten to play.
That's right.
I mean, and not to mention what it does for these youngsters who get to play, but also what it does for a community, for a school. I'm excited, and my daughters all went to one of their rivals. So,
hey, that is just some wonderful, good news. Folks that rolling up their sleeves and helping out folks in need. So I love that. And Greg, completely echo your comments there. All right, 2 quick comments, and then we're going to bring in James Malley. Going back to the Ford story, Catherine says, I've been attempting to test drive their newer Ford Bronco model, but no dealerships near me have them in stock. That's been a common challenge for sure. Marie Hurst, great to see you, Marie. On the poultry front, Marie says, eggs and chicken meat, avian influenza cases have been high and are currently high in 40 states, another factor influencing those commodities. Excellent point there. Okay. So Greg and Karin and this jam-packed, it's going to be James-packed episode of
It is going to be James-packed. You're right. Literally. Think about what you just said. James-packed.
I want to, I'll tell you what, it's Mondays. I want to introduce one of our favorite guests here, James Malley, CEO at Paccurate. James Malley, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be back. So thanks for having me.
Well, I tell you, Greg and Karin, the hits keep on coming out of the Paccurate team and family, and there's so much to celebrate. We're not going to have time to catch up our audience on everything, but welcome back and looking forward to diving into the news and Pack Simulate here in just a few minutes. But before we get there, Greg, Karin, and James, a little fun warm-up question with our friend James Malley here. It is National Pancake Day, folks. National Pancake Day. So the hot button question for you, James, you're going to be the leadoff hitter here, is Waffle House or IHOP? If you had to pick one and commit to it, which one would you pick?
This is going to be a very divisive answer, no matter what I pick. There was a
Why
time
we bring you on, James.
There was a time in my early 20s when I could stay up past 10 p.m. It was a miraculous time. I lived in LA, and we would go bar hopping all night and show up at Waffle House at like 3:30. I'd be like, all right, we could stay here for another hour and a half. That time is long gone, but just for the memories alone, Waffle House.
Oh, you're singing our song, James. I love that. Karin, let's go to you next. Waffle House or IHOP?
I'm gonna have to go Waffle House.
Okay.
So.
It's just that simple. I'm with you.
It's just that simple. They've got, great quick eggs, great service, a cast of characters that'll keep you entertained. And, it's like a meal and a show all at once. I love it.
I agree with you. Chantel agrees with you as well. All right. So Greg, cleanup hitter, Waffle House or IHOP?
I have to go IHOP. I was not brought up on Waffle House.
Ooh.
And honestly, even having lived in the South for 25 years, I have probably been to Waffle House less than 10 times. So my daughters all love it, both hopefully sober and in their college days. I don't think you need to say more than that.
Just like James. James just put it out
like
there and kept going.
Yeah. But particularly one thing at Waffle House, they do this kind of cinnamon roll pancake thing that, oh my gosh, it's like Cinnabon and pancakes at the same time, and I just can't imagine anything better than that.
I'm with you.
I'm sorry, gang. I know I've let you down.
You let me down. I wonder if the time I took you to Waffle House is the last time you had been to one, Greg. Okay,
it is, but that wasn't that long ago, was it?
No,
it was Memorial Day, right?
That's right. Dr. Rhonda is a big IHOP fan as well. She says, I've never eaten at a Waffle House. Goodness, I seem to be missing out. You are missing out. And let me tell y'all, when you visit Beyond the Waffles, the patty melt plate on wheat, because you're saving a couple calories there, that's the jam to invest in. Okay.
Also, the people, to Karin's point, it is fascinating. They're lit up all night, so you don't even have to go in to kind of see. They don't have curtains or anything, so you just drive by and you're like, not going in that one today. And by the way, if Kid Rock is ever in a Waffle House, there will be a fight. So just steer clear if you see Kid Rock, especially in an Atlanta Waffle House.
Well, whatever y'all do, just make sure you generously tip your servers.
Exactly.
Right? Generously tip your servers. Okay. So much to get to, so little time with James Malley from Paccurate. The first story we're going to dive in as we get down to business, James, Karin, and Greg, is this one. Climate reporting is about to change dramatically, it seems. So the Environmental Protection Agency has secured funding to better scrutinize companies' pledges and commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And a little 1-2 punch here, the Securities and Exchange Commission is very close to completing a new set of rules for public company reporting on overall climate goals. So, James, tell us more here.
Yeah, I think that's not a surprise, even if it may feel like kind of a shock. It's been kind of a long time coming. I think if you've been following the news and only reading the headlines on this over the past couple of years, you'd think this is like a Biden administration starting to crack down on industry. But what I think is fascinating is this is really bigger than any single administration, because the pressure is coming from the investors and the industry organizations that have been pushing this for quite a while. And so a lot of the investors want, to the meat of the article, they want the SEC to get real clear about this, because they want to do the right thing, but they want to make it easy. So they want the SEC to have these guidelines in place. But there's some challenges there. The SEC is kind of mildly defanged because of recent court decisions. And the EPA ends up at the moment being kind of better positioned to write some of the rules around this. So if they can figure it out and do it in a well-coordinated way where SEC, EPA, making it clear, not too horribly confusing, I call it a win.
I'm with you. And I love some things you mentioned there, because some folks may assume it's just a government push, but consumers, investors, and the government all. Greg, your thoughts here?
Yeah, so Eileen Murray, who is the chair of FINRA, the Association for Professional Financial Advisors and that sort of thing, she is an ESG hawk, and she helped construct some of what the SEC has come up with, and is strongly encouraging. That means strongly encouraging financial advisors and financial firms to be responsible to this. And I think one thing that is often overlooked, there is a lot of controversy about whether ESG is a good thing for investors. I think there are extremes in everything, but the truth is, to the point of what James does, if you can put more stuff in a box, right, use fewer boxes and optimize your shipping. By the way, that's something that companies have been trying to do for their inbound shipments forever. Right? Truckload quantities and things like that are, they've tried to not ship air, right? We talk a lot about that. There is not necessarily a zero-sum game between ESG initiatives and optimizing your company for profitability. In fact, I think there is a tremendous amount to be gained from things like packing more efficiently, or using lower carbon routes or lower carbon equipment and that sort of thing. Because guess what? Carbon costs money, right? The product, the fuels that create carbon, they cost big bucks, right? So if we can create efficiency, and by efficiency, I mean speed and reliability in the supply chain, and we can reduce inefficiency from an environmental standpoint, then why would we not do that? I think lots of companies, for the saving of cost, have been accidental environmentalists, as I call them, right? They don't want to spend money on fuel. You don't spend money on fuel, you burn less fuel, and therefore put less carbon into the atmosphere. So what's the harm? Yep. I think you have to balance it, of course, but I think there's a lot of synergy between this initiative and cost saving and efficiency in supply chain.
Well said, Greg. Karin Bursa.
So I think that this is going to give ESG initiatives a little more teeth. I think it's going to drive investment, but I also agree with Greg's comment that now we need the ability, or I'm going to take it a step further, your supply chain planning systems should consider your green KPIs or your energy KPIs as a part of the plan and allow a business to make some very intelligent and insightful investments, whether it's in transport or production or raw material or waste that needs to be addressed for the business. So you should look at expanding the key performance metrics that you're using to include things like carbon and waste in the marketplace.
Yep. Well said, Karin. Yep.
I mean, predominantly cost has been the KPI for supply chain. I would argue that there are now 4 pillars to supply chain, and you can break these down. Believe me, I've had this discussion a lot of ways. It's speed, reliability, cost, and ESG, right?
4 horsemen.
Ethics, as I call it, because all of those things are important to your business and or your constituency, which accrues to your brand equity, which Karin pointed out. Karin, you pointed out a lot of stuff this weekend, I just realized, is really important. That's really what supply chain delivers, is brand reputation and brand equity. So,
well said. The 4 horsemen. We've got to figure out which one's Ole and which one's Arn Anderson. We'll see. James Malley. I'll give you a little wrestling reference there. I'll give you the final word here as we're talking about how visibility into really bottom line results is about to change. Your final word, James.
Well, I think to Greg's point, particularly in parcel shipping, but in a lot of supply chain, when something's more expensive, it's also more polluting. Overnight, things going in a plane, it's more polluting. So I think the organizations that haven't really taken a good look at what Scope 3 emissions are, right. These are emissions that are reported widely in most of Europe. But in the US, it's kind of like not our problem because it happens outside our 4 walls. That's where the low hanging fruit, there's just so much money and emissions low hanging fruit there to get rid of with just some simple initiatives.
Well said, James, Greg, and Karin. Let's move right along because another big news story that came out here lately. FedEx has been in the news for 8 days or so, at least with this latest announcement, as they announced a big shipping rate increases, averaging 6.9% starting in January 2023, while they're also initiating some cost-cutting measures. By some accounts, they may be looking to find up to $8 billion in cash savings. How about that? But check out this headline from our friends at investing.com. FedEx drives its turnaround into the ditch. Okay, James, tell us a whole lot more.
Well, I spent the weekend reading, kind of like thought leaders in our space, really piling on FedEx with some really brutal takes here. I certainly think there's some blame with FedEx leadership. I think it also has to do with the global economy and everything that's going on in the world. The truth is somewhere in betwixt. I'm curious about Greg's spicy take on this. I hope it's spicier than his take on IPAs. But basically, I mean, the biggest problem really, at least to the point of the article, is that their expectations seem to be completely divorced from reality. And, the writer is really having a hard time understanding how that gap could be so massive that they wouldn't know what's going on, how bad the situation is. And I think if there's anything that can be done, cost cutting is the way you get the stock back up, but to kind of rebuild, particularly on the parcel, the e-commerce side. When I talk to large retailers, they love FedEx because FedEx, will work in kind of a collaborative way with them and say, okay, these costs are coming, but we'll send in some engineers and help, and we'll make this kind of like a joint project where we figure out how to keep costs low, keep our costs and your costs low. I think if they can figure out a way to turn that into a model, bring it downstream a little bit so the bulk of their customers get that kind of same feeling of collaboration. It's not this constant, butting heads thing. I think they could build a really, really strong service and company for the next few years.
Agreed. And some of those things, they're pausing Sunday deliveries. They're grounding some of the airplanes and a few others. So we'll see as it rolls out. Karin, I want to get your take here on what FedEx is up to.
Yeah, so I would say that this is another Winston Churchill moment where we don't want to waste a crisis. They need to make some pretty significant transformations. First, though, I would like to thank FedEx for not putting their price increase until after the holiday season. So there's one silver lining, I guess, in that. But at the same time, no publicly held company likes to make an announcement like this where they're lowering their earnings expectations. And that concerns me with the magnitude that they lowered their earning expectations, that there could be more difficult months and bad news ahead for FedEx. Meanwhile, UPS is enjoying double-digit increases in their business. So it's time for FedEx to really look at their process overall and maybe focusing some of that efficiency and innovation back on their business.
What's that, Karin? Greg White?
Buckle up, y'all. FedEx is one of the most classically mismanaged companies in all of supply chain and has been for nearly a decade now. I'm frankly surprised that they're still around independently because, Scott, you and I talked 2 or 3 years ago about the fact that they were the laggard of all of the parcel logistics supply chain carriers out there. By the way, we're going to find out if Tevin Taylor is
That's right
about
Love you, Tevin. I promise.
Yeah, and I hope your management does you better service in the future. But not only did they drive their own turnaround into the ditch, but Thursday when they announced this, they were credited by the financial press as the reason that the market dropped almost 5% that day. That's the kind of impact that poor management, and particularly this company, which has such a broad reach, can have on others. Because thankfully, yes, they did delay the discussion around or the implementation of their price increases till after peak season. But don't think companies won't adjust because of that. We'll still feel the pain because they're going to have to get in front of the profit margin cut that they're going to take as they continue to ship goods to us through FedEx. Now, on the other hand, to James's point, they are incredibly flexible, and that is probably part of what has made them so inefficient, is that they do a lot of innovative or attempt a lot of innovative things, and that costs money. So we'll just have to see if they remain independent. Sheldon Rose speculates that Walmart will buy them. Sheldon is no official analyst, but not a bad idea. And in fact, that was on one of my commentaries around FedEx last week as well. And interesting, the take of, shouldn't Walmart stay in their lane? My argument is that Walmart has such a wide lane. There are other companies doing this. American Eagle has bought a logistics provider. Other companies have bought logistics providers, right? Because they want the stability. So we have to think about whether FedEx, we really do have to consider whether FedEx is a viable enterprise independent going forward. Now, look, this is one thing you learn in the investment game, and that is active investors will not let this company fail. They will blow the entire management team out to protect their investment. And there are a lot of course, institutional investors in this company. So FedEx is not going down the tubes. It may cease to be independent. It may instead get new management, may get totally new management, or there are a dozen other ways that investors might intervene in this company to shore it up. But it's not going away.
You had me at Walmart and FedEx teaming up. That is intriguing. And I want to say about 3 years ago, Greg, me and you got with Kathy Morrow Robertson. We're talking about that idea 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, Kathy, if you're listening, I love what you do.
Don't
Love
think
freight
Walmart
forwarding.
is not watching this closely. They are unquestionably, as are others, I'm sure.
Right. All right. So James Malley, betwixt Greg and Karin, always makes me think of
Yes, I
Halloween
love
candy.
that. By the way,
That was pretty spicy between
that's
Greg
a
and
Midwest.
Karin.
That's a classic. Betwixt and between. That's a classic
Yes.
Mark Twain reference.
All right. So James Malley, so much intriguing news still taking place across global supply chain. We're just scraping the really tip of the iceberg with our chat here over the hour. But Paccurate's been on quite a roll. Pre-show we were talking about. I don't know if you can say it or not, so I'm going to kind of keep it vague. A well-known global technology provider. Y'all hit their radar, and they just had to learn more. And I think we've seen some news releases come out about that. But
You can say it.
Tell. I'm intrigued.
so Google's like, hey, we got to learn more about what Paccurate is doing. So they found James Malley and set him down and interviewed him up one side and down the other. And that is outstanding. So James, for the 2 or 3 people, you've been with us a couple different times on supply chain now. For the 2 or 3 people that don't know what Paccurate does, in a nutshell, tell us what the company does.
Sure. Paccurate's basically an AI platform that helps shippers figure out which cartons they should use and controls exactly how they're packed in real time. So it's just like we were talking about before, cost-saving exercise. It's a emissions reducing exercise and a labor efficiency kind of benefit as well.
Excellent.
In one.
What's that, Greg?
All in one. I love that. Right. I mean, that's the perfect example that this is not a zero-sum game. So
Good point.
Good time to be here today, James.
By the way, the more kind of large retailers we have on board, the more proof that it's truly zero sum. Because when they save money on their parcel shipments, you think the carrier would lose money, but the data shows that's not true. Because they can actually fit more shipments into trailers. So those trailers become vastly more profitable. So there's really nobody that loses except for maybe the styrofoam packing peanuts
So
industry.
maybe if there's like a really inefficient carrier out there, they should consider adding some technology like Paccurate.
I mean,
have we been talking about anybody like that?
Well, so Karin, I remember us chatting about packaging long time, years ago, before it became a really sexy thing to talk about. I think it's fascinating what the Paccurate team's up to. Your quick comment here, Karin.
Yeah, it is fascinating and it's untapped. I think that they are just in the early stages of some pretty exciting innovations in efficiently and safely packing goods, but also helping to maximize the available capacity for the carriers. So it becomes kind of a win-win situation in the way goods are moved to market. Agreed.
And by the way, we're about to talk about Pack Simulate, but Amanda and Catherine, we had a webinar with James and a colleague and a member of the Stored team who's also been on quite a roll. If we could drop the replay link for that webinar, if folks want to take a deeper dive into what they're doing, if we can drop that in the comments, that'd be great. Okay, so James, let's talk about Pack Simulate.
Sure.
That was creating a little bit of buzz at the end of that webinar. Tell us more.
Sure. So, when we got started, we mostly focused on the execution. So generating packing instructions in real time for the folks working in the warehouse. But Pack Simulate kind of represents our first platform application where this is something that doesn't need to, disrupt anything in the warehouse. You don't have to think about how to fit it in. It's literally just looking at historical data, and our simulation engine kind of runs in the background and then tells you exactly which carton sizes to use in each of your locations based on your unique SKUs, your rate tables, pretty much any cost structure you can think that might affect it. So it's like really low impact, but pretty high lift. We've seen anywhere between 2 and 5% savings on transportation, upwards of 10% savings on corrugate, which is it's like pickles, Greg or Scott. It's that's something that's gotten extremely expensive, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. So we're really excited about Pack Simulate, and we've been getting a good response so far.
And folks can sign up, right? They can sign up. Tell us about that.
Yeah, they can go, and there's a little bit of a white glove experience at the beginning. So you go to the website there, sign up, and we'll get in touch, and we kind of try to learn about your operation. So how many cartons can you deal with? What are your item rules? Are they fragile, stackable, rolling, nesting, all these things? And then basically we'll help you measure not just what the cost savings of switching out your cartons, but also what are some other initiatives that you could undertake? And here's kind of a ballpark opportunity for savings and emissions reduction.
Love that. It's just so practical and innovative. All right, Greg.
It's three-dimensional Tetris is what it is. It is. It's three-dimensional Tetris, if anyone knows what Tetris is. But you also get to decide the size of the screen that you're fitting everything into, right? I mean, for those of you who haven't played Tetris, it's amazing. And
addictive.
The way I interpret Paccurate is it's three-dimensional. Your computer basically plays Tetris for you, and you always win.
That's a great way to describe it, Greg. We've gotten some feedback along those lines. Karin, your final comment. I'm gonna ask James how folks can connect with him and the Paccurate team here in just a second. But Karin, how cool is this Pack Simulate?
Oh, it's really cool. I mean, we've all received packages from wherever we order our goods from that come in the box is yay big and the item is, tiny. And so they're shipping air and extra, styrofoam or whatever, but it's a waste. It's a waste for the carrier. That's just air that they're shipping in the process. And then whoever's doing local delivery, same thing. So it does have a butterfly effect or a ripple effect in each move that those boxes take or that packaging takes.
Agreed. Yeah. And it's not good for anybody. It's not good for anybody. So James, folks, obviously, we've dropped a link to the webinar. Rick is who joined you, right, James? Rick
Jones.
Yes, Rick Jones, because we missed that opportunity to have a lot of fun with Rick James in that webinar. But I'll tell you,
you didn't miss every opportunity.
No, you took some opportunities. Yeah.
So Rick Jones, I tell you, he and our friend from Stored brought a lot of industry perspective, been there, done that to this innovative Paccurate story. So y'all check that out. We'll drop the link to that webinar in the chat. You can also sign up for Pack Simulate. That link is in the chat. James, how else for folks that aren't Google, big names like Google, how can the Scott Lutons of the world reach out and connect with you, James?
Well, if Scott Luton has a cousin that's a really good computer programmer, he can go to Paccurate.io and sign up for an API key and try out our service in about 10 seconds. For everybody else like me and Scott, you could find me on LinkedIn or in the comments during a Supply Chain Now show.
Well, I love it. And kidding aside, you're a great fellow founder and entrepreneur, and you're changing the game. You and Paccurate are changing the game for the better. You're a great social person to follow across social. So folks, connect with one of our faves, James Malley. Thank you for your time here today. And James, we hope to have you back soon before you take over the world, before your next appearance. But thanks so much for your time, James Malley, CEO of Paccurate.
Thanks, everybody.
You bet.
Thanks, James.
Breath of fresh air, Greg and Karin, when it comes to James Malley. I think that was probably his third or fourth appearance here on Supply Chain Now. And he's just, there's something about, he's got a great sense of humor, but that aside, what he's doing and how much is changing the game. And he's just so matter of fact about it, Greg. I mean, what do you think when you think of James Malley and Paccurate? What's so special about him?
Well, I mean, first of all, what they're doing is unbelievably complex and genius, and yet so simple. Go get an API and hook it up, and they'll show you what you need to do with your product. Secondly, I think it's something that every consumer ought to be demanding. Just the comments, and Scott and Karin, at the beginning of this year, we all were kvetching about our embarrassing and guilt-inducing stack of boxes after Christmas, right? And just the utter waste of it all. And I just think that, there should be an uprising of consumers to say, please, all of you commerce providers, do this. Do it at every tier. Do it at every level. Shipping to one another, shipping to us, of course, right? I think there's a big opportunity, and honestly, I haven't talked to James about whether this is even where he would go, but I think there's a big opportunity. Karin, you and I have been dealing with truckload quantities and shipping air forever, truckloads and containers and things like that. And they could represent, right, how to not ship air at the most costly to the environment and to fuel and to companies level in supply chain, right?
Well said. Karin, speak to that.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, Greg and I are on the same page. And it's interesting how every story we went through today on the Buzz was really interrelated, right down to this last piece about, corrugated or shipping product. And that's part of the beer crisis as well, or what's driving beer prices up is paperboard is one of the supply components that has increased dramatically from a cost perspective. So, the savings are out there, but let's look for this efficiency and getting better leverage out of the available capacity as well, right? As we look at the green emissions and the ESG considerations, this is a great place to look for some low-hanging fruit pretty quickly, I think, for most businesses.
Agreed. Speaking to that, Glormar, we've all she's got a few pictures of those big boxes with the tiny product inside. It's irritating, she says, to see such a waste. And to Greg and Karin's point, we all got to be demanding it as consumers that those practices do indeed change. And Tom, thank you for the feedback. Always a pleasure to have you join us. Hope you have a big week in Spain. All right.
Enjoy the coast, Tom.
Yes, I'm very jealous, Tom.
Of that also, yeah.
Seriously, Tom. So Greg and Karin, we'll start to wrap here. What a great hour. Great guests, great news stories, some interesting developments. Love y'all's take, some spicy take, as James Malley put it. If you were to share one final thought, and before I think about that for a second, because there's so much to choose from, so little time, I do want to drop this link in the chat. The latest edition of With That Said, which is our LinkedIn newsletter. Went out on Saturday. I think that was our fifth or sixth edition. We've only been doing it for about a month and some change. Over 15,000 subscribers.
Wow.
So folks, be like the cool kids out there. Check that out. Subscribe if you are so inclined. And hey, comment. Just like we were talking earlier on Greg's supply chain commentaries. That's some of the best part. The comments and the conversations that are in the comments of those regular publications. So y'all check out the link. We'll make it easy for you there. Karin, let's start with you. Final thought. Tech Talk moves right along. Of course, folks can get Tech Talk Digital Supply Chain Podcast wherever they get their podcasts. Your final thought you want to leave with our listeners here, Karin?
My final thought is there are challenges. There are shortages. We're all feeling pressure, but it is a great time to be in supply chain. So never before has there been such an opportunity for each and every one of us to have a great impact on our businesses. So keep tuning in here, subscribe to Tech Talk, and let's share what's working.
Well said. Absolutely. Share, talk about it, all drive change together. Always opportunities. Greg, your final thought here on September 26th version of Supply Chain Buzz.
Oh, you're marking the date because of what I said earlier.
Yeah.
You caught me.
We're going to be checking the stock prices. So.
Stock prices and oil prices. Yeah. Please hold me accountable on that. And I hope I'm wrong or right. I hope I'm right on the price, wrong on the crushing other
agreed.
Producers. Right. But it is. So I think an important adjunct to what Karin said. This is a great time to be in supply chain. The world finally recognizes that business is delivered through supply chain. And most importantly, brand equity, right? Most importantly is the reputation of your business. And the more companies that recognize that supply chain is key to their reputation and work back from that into reinforcing their supply chain so they can deliver at least their trademark on all of their products. Right, but certainly can deliver what their consumers require. The better off we'll be. It is getting ugly, and it's going to get uglier, and it's going to be ugly for some years. Let's face it. I'm not running for office, so I don't have to candy coat it. But I want you to understand that none of this means the end of the world. I talk to so many people who think every crisis is the end of the world. None of this means the end of the world. The economies will slow down globally, at varying rates. Recession is already here, though we probably won't admit it until the end of the year. And it's inevitable to get deeper. Inflation will not be cut by the end of the year because of what the Fed is doing. And I think all of us in supply chain know that it has more to do with the constriction of the supply chain than it does with monetary policy at this point. But anyway, all of these things are going to happen, but they will correct themselves. They have corrected themselves in the past. We had a huge and very long recession when the dot-com bust happened again in 2008. We're due for another one. People will survive this, and we'll all come out of it stronger on the other side. Hold cash, right? Don't stop investing. Continue to invest in your companies. Continue to invest in other companies. Be really smart and make sure those companies are valuable, right? That have real value. Because the day of unwise exuberance, it's over for the next few years at least. So
I was trying to do my Greg White and count off your.
Well, you know what, Dr. Rhonda said something about her meandering statement earlier, so I'm going to deliver one so she can feel better about hers. But anyway, the point is there is abundance in the universe, and that this too shall pass, but it is going to be rough. So batten down the hatches, prepare yourself, and just be ready to come out stronger on the other side.
Yes. Whenever I hear "this too shall pass," it reminds me of one of our favorite phrases. It may pass like a kidney stone, but this too shall pass.
Yeah.
So,
and likely.
So Greg and Karin, great episode of Supply Chain Buzz. Thanks to Karin Bursa, host of Tech Talk Digital Supply Chain Podcast, for joining us here today. Thank you, Karin.
Thank you.
And Greg White, always a pleasure. I think we've got a sit-in for you. No, not next week. I guess it's the 10th of October, because you've got some travels as you take the gospel of Greg White out on the road, right?
That's right. I have some travels. That's unless you consider screaming at a football field gospel. It's not really all gospel.
It depends on what part of the country, I think. But
yeah.
But hey, Greg, always a pleasure conducting the Supply Chain Buzz with you, folks. Thanks for all the great comments. I know we couldn't get to all of them. Y'all keep that coming. Lean into all the market conditions that Karin and Greg have been describing here. We're going to get through it. It's going to be painful at times, but the world is certainly not ending. Big thanks to James Malley for joining us here today. Folks, check out Paccurate, because it takes innovative and entrepreneurial thinking like that to get through these challenging times for sure. Big thanks to the production team. Always a pleasure. Thanks for what y'all do for us here at Supply Chain Now. As we wrap here today, big shout out again to Dave Krejci Foundation. Talk about organizations just doing wonderful work out there for folks in need. We got to be more like them, right? We got to be more like Donna and Allison and Matt, all with the Dave Krejci Foundation. Along those lines, as we wrap here today, Scott Luton challenging all of our listeners, hey, do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. And on that note, we see you next time right back here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.